As most of y'all know, I like sports. I grew up playing sports, and like watching sports, playing sports is something that my family and I always bonded over. My first love has been and always will be baseball. And I can still remember one of the best games that I was ever a part of when I was in probably about 9th grade, 10th grade. It was a fall ball high school league that we were playing. And I remember it was just a lot of craziness that happened around it. It was us and another team were like the two best teams in the league at this time. We had been playing maybe a couple of weeks up to this point, and we knew that us and this other team were the best two teams, and us and this other team, we ended up playing like on a Thursday night. Like it was like under the lights. It was kind of like the big game of the week. We were fired up for it. They were fired up for it. I remember when we were getting ready to play, like our whole team was really amped up because we were like, they had a couple of guys that were really good pitchers, and we knew this, and we were like, we can hit them, we'll be fine, all this kind of stuff. We go into the first couple of innings of the game, and we hadn't had a hit. We had booted a couple of balls, and like it was just a rough first couple of innings. They were beating us like 3-0 or something, and just like we weren't playing our best. That we could tell like it was like this kind of almost like this nervous feeling in the dugout of like, okay, are we as good as we think we are, and all this kind of stuff. We're out in the field. We come in. We get a third out. We coming in, and as we're on our way in, our coach, as guys were running in, our coach like met us at first base, and like he said, everybody up. And as we're running in, all of us, we just kind of like, we huddle up. And we're all kind of waiting. Like we're just the third inning or something like that. And we're all like waiting for him because we're like, man, we got to get like to bat. And we just had a frustrating inning and all this kind of stuff. So our coach is standing there, all of us around, and he's just kind of like, he's looking at the other dugout. And he's just like intense, staring at the other dugout. And we're like, Coach, you got something? Like, we need to go. We need a bat. Like the umpires are going to get mad at us in a second. And he looks at us. He says, in some rather colorful language, he looks at us. He says, we're like, you're all right. And he looks at us. He goes, no. I'm like, okay. He's like, I'm pretty like angry, right? So it's after 9 o'clock, and filter's still on. Good. But he just looks at me. He looks at us, and he's like, I'm angry. And we're like what happened? Like we know we're not playing well right now. Like we get it. And he goes, no, it ain't with y'all. He said, I'm angry at that other coach over there. And they're like, what? He's like, the one sitting on the bucket, the little fat one, and all this kind of stuff. Like he started insulting the coaches, and we're like, what happened? He said, I was when we finished last inning, I was on my way back, and I could hear him say to another one of his coaches, this is just too easy. Now, like, we're all in this huddle. We're all like kind of frustrated, kind of aggravated, but we know our skill. We know how good we are, and we know we're just having a bad day. And all of a sudden, he says, this is just too easy. And we all kind of glaring over at the coach, and we're like, you said what? Okay, so all of a sudden, there was like a switch that flipped in the huddle, right? Like there was like all of a sudden, all of us are standing there, and like one of our guys pops up, and he's like, you want to show him how easy it is? Let's go. Like, all right. So we break it down, whatever, 1, 3, or whatever, and we go in. First guy comes up to bat, double. Second guy comes up to bat, double. Third guy comes up to bat, double. Fourth guy comes up to bat, single. Fifth guy comes up to bat, home run. 5 batters, 5 runs immediately, right? All of a sudden, our attitude in the game just completely shifted, right? We went from, oh man, this might just not be our night, to all of a sudden we were diving for balls, making plays. Like we didn't make another error in the game. We knocked not just one, but both of these like good pitchers that they had off the mound. Like we were fired up. We won the game something like 14-3. Like we 10-run ruled them. We beat the absolute hell out of them. Like it was great. We were all fired up. We're all excited. We're like, this is great. At the end of the game, the coach pulls us all aside. He looks at us and he says, remember tonight. He's like, in fact, what I want y'all to do is I want y'all to take a Sharpie and write on the brim of your hat, like on the inside of your hat, this is too easy, because this is the attitude we need to play with for the rest of the season. And I still remember, like, our practices got, like, crisp. Our games, like, we started, like, hitting and playing a heck of a lot better. Like, we just looked like a really, really good team. But 3 weeks later, the coach, we were talking to him at a practice one day. We had been playing well. He looks at us, and he said, we started talking about that night, that game, and all this kind of stuff. He looks at us, he says, I got a confession to make. We said, what? He said, that coach never said anything. And we're like, what? Like, wait, what? Like, this is a lie? He says, the problem is, though, is that when we got on the field, you guys didn't believe you belonged there. You might say you did. You might pretend that you did. You might want to try and act like you did. You were trying to talk trash. You were trying to be confident. But you guys, when you walked up to the plate, your body language was different whenever you were playing against those guys. Against anybody else in the league that we're playing, at any other point that he's telling us, he said, at any other point, you guys were different. But when you played that game, there was part of you that wasn't completely convinced that you were going to win. Any other team, you were convinced you were going to win. I think there's a parallel when it comes to our faith. Because there's part of us, I think, that when it comes to our faith, right, like there's something about being able to be completely committed, completely in, knowing that we're going to win, knowing that we can be saints, knowing that what God has done for us is continuing to do for us and wants to do for us, right? Putting complete confidence in that. Like there's something about that I think when it comes to our belief in our faith that sometimes I believe there are a lot of us, myself included, that we believe that to a certain extent, but not quite totally. You see, our scripture today, our first reading in our gospel today is a whole heck of, both of them have to do with the poor. Both of them have to do with kind of puff bet situations, right? Kind of sad situations. But our scripture is not just about money or poverty or those kind of things. Our scripture is about commitment. And being able to have faith in light of big commitment. Let's look at our first reading, for example. Prophet Elijah is traveling through this area called Zarephath. Now, Zarephath is not a Jewish area. It's a pagan area, or it is a Gentile area, we should say, right? So as he's passing through this area of Zarephath, he comes across this woman who's picking up sticks. It was a normal thing. She's got to do the stuff in the house. He comes across this woman picking up sticks, and he looks at her and says, "Can you help me out with a glass of water?" He's been traveling. He's a prophet, right? He doesn't have a lot of people. He doesn't have stuff, but he's like, "Can you help me out with a glass of water?" The lady says, "Sure." She goes to get it, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I've been traveling a while, so is there any way that you can make me a little piece of bread with that?" Seems like a pretty straightforward thing, right? And the woman then reveals her desperation. She reveals the actual situation she is in. Because she says, "I only have a handful of flour and a little bit of oil left. Whenever I go home, my plan is right now to collect these sticks, to build a fire, to be able to use the last little bit of food that I have to feed myself and my son. And after that, we will surely die." This woman is on the verge of starving. This woman has nothing else. It is a hopeless cause, an empty case. She's done. She reveals how desperate of a situation she's in. And what seems to be one of the most insensitive moments in the Old Testament, Elijah looks at her and says, "Yeah, but hook me up with a piece of bread first." Because the God of Israel, my God, the God that I speak on behalf of as a prophet, right? The God of Israel is going to say, he has this promise that your jug will not be dry and your jar will not be empty. She has no context. She doesn't know who the God of Israel is. The God of Israel could be a little statue somewhere, right? The God of Israel can be a made-up thing that a cult leader figured out, right? The God of Israel has no kind of, there's no kind of paradigm that she is going to understand who the God of Israel is. But because this prophet asked, basically, she has been presented with a choice at this point. Do I give my last little bit of food, possibly, to this guy? And hope and trust that some way I'm not going to starve and my son will not starve? Or do I eat it for myself and just hope? Or be content with where I'm going and what's happening? A Gentile woman in an area that is far from Jerusalem reveals to us what it means to trust. That the God of Israel, who she doesn't know, who she's never heard of, has made this promise. And you know what? I'm going to take him up on it. I can only imagine that as she's making the bread, like kneading the dough and going through the whole process, that she's sitting there thinking, I'm an idiot that I'm about to give this to someone else, because this is my last little bit of sustenance. And yet, she trusts. She's committed. She gives everything that she has left. And God provides for her. In our gospel today, right, we hear about Jesus. He's in the temple area. Now, with a little bit of context, a little bit of kind of like, just for us to understand what's going on, where he is, and what this kind of layout looked like. In the temple, when you would walk into the temple, right, into the actual places of, like, into the inner, into the sanctuary area, right? When they would walk in to actually come and do their like worship and do their prayer, what would happen is that when they walked in, there were like these funnels essentially on the side, and that was called the treasury. Why? Because that's where people would drop off their almsgiving, right? They would drop off their alms, like for the different things that would needed to take place in the temple, and to like offer particular prayers for particular people or particular intentions. So for example, there was one of these chests with this funnel with like a little coin spot, right, where they would deposit coins, that was for doves. And what they would do is the priests, every so often, they would sacrifice doves on the altar, and they would do it for certain intentions. Similar to how we'll have like mass intentions. Somebody calls the office, hey, can I get a mass said for my grandmother? Sure. It's like $3 or something like that, but those are the names that we'll say at the beginning of mass or in the intentions, right? There's a spot where they would say like, oh, for all the incense that is being burned in the temple, right? For the different supplies, the gold, for different reasons. Like there were different funnels for different things. Kind of like we want to light a candle, right, for a certain intention. There's a little slot, drop in $1, whatever it is, right? Like we have like a background, like there's a background to all of these kind of things, even that we practice here. But instead of like passing a collection or having it like in these different stations, what they did in the temple is they would walk in and they would drop in the money. The problem is that the treasury was a public space because people walked in and walked out. So it was something that a lot of times you could kind of like get a little bit of an ego boost, right? If you would come and drop off a lot of money, right? If you would come and drop off a lot of coins, well, when you would pour that in, all of a sudden you're hearing clank, 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 like, right? It's loud. It almost sounds like a slot machine. Like stuff is going in, and people are seeing, oh, that person must be wealthy because look how much they're giving, or that person must be faithful because look how much they're giving, right? So Jesus is sitting, looking at the treasury. He's watching people walk in. He's watching people deposit these kind of gifts, right? As he's sitting there watching this, he sees this poor little widow walk in. And she doesn't put in a lot. She puts in 2 coins. And the 2 coins, some translations of the Bible, some translations of Scripture say that they're 2 pennies. It's the smallest of the small coin that could possibly be given. And that's what she puts into the treasury. Now, when she does this, Jesus is sitting there, and he's so moved that he stands up and he says, this widow, this woman has done the greatest almsgiving of anyone else here. And he's saying this publicly to everybody who he has watched walk in and drop off more money. And he's also saying it to his disciples. And I can only imagine that this little woman is probably thinking, why are you looking at me? Leave me alone. Right? Why are you calling everybody's attention to me? But Jesus points it out. He says, it's because she gives her entire livelihood. You know, it's more than a lot, all. She gives all. The rich people give a lot. But she gives all. I say that because in both of those cases, whether it be the widow of the Old Testament or the widow of the New Testament, these 2 women, right, teach us something about what it means to give and invest our life in the Lord. You know, as a priest now for 8 years, I've done like a decent amount of like conferences and things and talks and these different things on like how to be like good in leadership. We've had a couple of different programs run through the diocese. There's been a couple of times that I've been able to go to like pastor schools and like different things like that. Just like how is it that you're called to be a leader, right? And one of the things I remember a speaker saying one time was he used this image, and it was with the priest of the diocese, and he said, okay, if you have two options, he said, if I give you the option of 100 people that are 90% bought in to your mission, or 10 people that are totally bought in. So 100 people at 90%, or 10 people that are totally all in, 100% invested, right? He asked us, he was like, who would pick this one, who would pick that one? And I remember, I think I said I want the 100 people because a few more volunteers doesn't hurt, right? He said it's interesting because actually organizations that have less people with more buy-in typically are more successful. Ten people, 100% bought in, do more than 100 people that are only 90% in. Our church is a perfect example of this. Because think about the history of our church. Think about where we've come from. That Jesus Christ calls his 12 disciples. One of them sucks. One of them betrays him, right? Jesus dies, resurrects, ascends to heaven, right? Pentecost happens. Now you have 11 apostles that are left. Peter in charge, right? The denier, the bad fisherman, all those kind of things, right? Like Peter is the one in charge. He's the one that's going to lead them. And he is the one that is now going to be the one that's going to be responsible for spreading this faith across the world. 11 men. 2,000 years ago, said yes, fully committed, fully believing what Jesus said was true, what Jesus did was effective, and what Jesus was calling them to do was going to be successful, right? 11 men saw this mission, followed it, and were 100% bought in, even to the point of death. And 2,000 years later, you and I on a Sunday night at 9:30 at night are here. Just imagine what that first gathering was for them. Like Peter looking at his apostles and saying, okay, let's get an inventory. Let's get an idea of what we have, right? How many priests do we have? Or how many bishops do we have? 11. Okay, the 11 of us. No funny hats yet, but we all here. Good. How many priests do we have? 11. Okay, so it's just us. Okay, good. Okay, how many deacons do we have? None. That's a few chapters later in the Bible. How many trained theologians do we have? None that are trained. It's just us, right? Okay, so it's the 11 of us. That's it. Okay. How many religious do we have, right? Religious sisters, brothers, all these people that are going to help out and do all the mission stuff of the church? None, okay? How many seminaries do we have? None. How many seminarians do we have? None. How many Christians do we have? Well, we've got a couple hundred friends, and that's about it. They don't hate us completely. Okay, good. So we got a few hundred. So this is supposed to go across the world. How many countries have heard the Christian message to this point? 1. Okay. How many buildings do we have? None. How many universities do we have? None. How many schools do we have? None. How many written gospels do we have? None. So we got to have really good memory to be able to preach the gospel because we don't have anything written down. Okay. How much money do we have? What you got in your pockets? Because I got a button and 30 cents, right? Okay, good. How much experience in foreign missions do we have? Anybody been on a mission trip to Mexico out of the group? No? What's Mexico? I don't know. All right. Okay, good. So, none. How many influential contacts do we have? People that might have some money or might like us. Well, if they're influential, they probably hate us. So, none. Okay, good. And then lastly, what's the societal attitude towards us? Well, either they don't know we exist or they want to kill us. Good luck. That's what 11 men were faced with at the very beginning of the church. In the Acts of the Apostles, right after Pentecost, this is what they were faced with. But because they were 100% in, completely committed, not going to hold anything back, recognizing that God was calling them, working in them, and was wanting to do something through them, that all of a sudden, that those 11 men have influenced the world more than any of us could imagine. This idea of being completely bought in or partially bought in is still alive in our church. That conflict is still alive in our church. Because I do think that today, right, we have more Christians. All those numbers we could count. We could do all kind of different things. We have The Catholic Church is a charitable organization, serves more people around the world than any other organization, right? We educate people, we work with people, we school people, we do all these things in the healthcare system, right? All these kind of things. The Catholic Church does all these kind of things, and yet we still have a question of buy-in. Because I think we have a lot of Catholics that are somewhere in the 20% bought in, 50% bought in, 80% bought in, 92.7% bought in. But how many of us are 100% bought in? All in. That doesn't change by just like lecturing and banging a pulpit. That number in my heart changes when I trust that God is going to actually show up. When I can actually give God control, like the two widows in our scripture today. When I can actually give God control and allow him to work. No matter how desperate of a situation I might feel like I'm in, no matter how much control I might desire, no matter how much fear I might be struggling with, right? Like, the only way for me to allow God to use that to have complete control is for me to let go of the 10%, the 5% that I'm trying to hold on to. God, I will do everything you ask me to do. I'll go to Mass every day if you want, but like, don't touch this. Because I like this. God, I will go to confession once a week, right? And not even just because I have to, right? But like, just do me a favor, just like, don't make me let go of this thing. Because it's like my security blanket. And I don't want to, and I'm afraid to see what that would look like otherwise. Do we trust the Lord to have complete control? Like, what would God having complete control of your life look like? What would it look like, right, to let go of your favorite sin? And to not just like think, oh man, it's just going to happen. What would it look like to let go of anxiety and to like trust that God is going to take care of you? What would it look like to trust the Lord with your future? Whatever it might be. Like, God, I want to do what you want me to do. I'm even willing to let go of control there. Again, this isn't the fruit of just like a choice. This is fruit of a deepening relationship with God. Trust is only a fruit of love. And if God loved us, we're called to love him back. Today, as we come to Mass, as we continue in this Mass, as we approach the altar in communion, God gives himself to us. He meets us in our fear, in our struggle, in our grasping. And he just wants us to trust him, that he can provide for our good. Just like the widows in Scripture that we heard today. Can we trust the Lord to provide for anything and everything that we need?